What is up, Pitt fans? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Petersen Events Center. My name is Stephen Thompson with Inside the Panthers. We've just wrapped up talking to Jeff Capel, Blake Hinson, and and Ishmael Leggett after the Panthers took down Binghamton by a final score of 89-60 at the Petersen Events Center. They are 2-0. And talking to Jeff Capel and just watching this game, they told us that this was exactly what Pitt needed in a game like this. It was a big win. They were able to win comfortably, get some guys in, use the full extent of their bench, but it came with some adversity. It was not totally easy, and we'll get into that in a second. But the Panthers survived some of that adversity. They started slow and felt like for a second that Binghamton, who's a good opponent, we talked about that a little bit leading up to this game, but they're a good team. They are veteran. They are led by their guards, and they gave Pitt a challenge, especially in that first half. But the Panthers survive. They come out of there with the win, and they are 2-0 for better or worse. They are 2-0, and they have looked good doing it. When I say it came with some adversity, I think first of all you got to talk a little bit about the defensive effort that they put forward. They were not perfect defensively. I mean, the final stats look pretty good. 46 actually. Oh no, that's Pitt shooting. Excuse me. I got to get to Binghamton stats. So 34% from the field for Binghamton for this game, 32% from three, 55% from the line. Not very good. They committed 15 turnovers, which Pitt turned into a bunch of points off of turnovers, if I'm correct. But I mean, you could see in the first half that Binghamton's movement without the ball was really testing Pitt's communication as a group of guys that's relatively new with each other. They really stressed that. There were a couple times where they found backdoor cuts that were pretty easy. These experienced guards that we've been talking about for Binghamton were able to win at the point of attack, drive into the paint, get some paint touches from there, kick out, and then or either find some shots from close range. Pitt once again did a pretty good job defending inside of the paint. If I look at the split box score, points in the paint were 34-18 in favor of Pitt. I mean, they've got some nuclear deterrence in the paint between both Diaz-Graham twins and Federico, who is already one of the. I think I can't remember if I saw this stat. If I'm remembering this stat correctly, that I saw before the season started, but I think he's the leading returning shot blocker in the ACC. But then, of course, the improvements that the Diaz-Graham twins have made to their body, to their skills, just more experienced. That creates for a pretty scary set of interior rim defenders. But those guys had to bail the Pitt's perimeter defenders out a little bit, and that's not coming from me. That's from Blake Hinson himself. He called out him and not a select few others, I believe, with his quote, just for not being good enough defensively at the point of attack. And he said they put the bigs in some tough spots when they do that, when they can't keep their man in front of them. That leads to a lot of opportunities for foul trouble for the bigs. It forces them to make some pretty incredible defensive plays to keep points off the board. So they want to avoid that going forward. It's something I'm sure they'll address in practice. And it's there is skill to playing defense, but it's effort, it's focus. It's knowing that you slide your feet every time. That's stuff that guys like Pitt has, especially their starters and on the perimeter. They have good enough athletes to do that. It's not like they're getting outclassed by a team that is just better athletes than them and that can run around them or is more skilled or something like that. No, Pitt has all the tools that they need to be great perimeter defenders, but to Hinson, he wants to see a little bit better attention to detail, and that includes from himself. He did take responsibility for being one of those guys who wasn't good enough defensively at the point of attack. But the other thing was they allowed Binghamton to make 6 of 13 attempts from three in the first half. That's a 46% rate, I believe, and they improved. They settled in, held the Bearcats to a 12 from three in the second half. Capel took a little bit of responsibility for this, saying that it was part of the game plan to really collapse the paint, let up some outside shots, and see what happens. And it didn't really go their way in the second half. I didn't feel like there was a major shift to closing out harder on shooters in the second half, but I think the shots just didn't end up falling. Either way, Pitt was able to figure it out, and I think part of that is staying so solid inside the paint and trusting a team like Binghamton, who's maybe they only shot 32% from three against Northwestern. I guess we don't really know 2 games into the season what kind of shooting team they are, but you just kind of assume that a team like Binghamton, an America East team, doesn't boast the most talented group of shooters on the planet. And I think Pitt will end up facing some better shooting teams down the road, especially, we'll maybe talk about this at the end or sometime next week. But, after these 2 games against Florida Gulf Coast and one more team that I cannot remember, it slips my mind. It is another mid-major. But, after that, it's a stretch of 5 in a row against Jacksonville is the last team. Florida Gulf Coast and Jacksonville round out this kind of first set of 4 games against mid-majors or low majors in the non-conference slate before you get 5 in a row against Power 5 teams. So, I think those teams, especially teams like Clemson, teams like, even Florida and definitely Baylor. I mean, I watched Baylor play Auburn the other night. They looked fantastic. They're going to have a lot more outside threats, and you're going to have to be better at the point of attack. You have to win your one-on-one matchups a little bit better to avoid creating those drive and kick opportunities that Binghamton used really expertly to create some open looks from 3, and then they knocked those down. So, lots to improve defensively, but offensively, I mean, I feel like they didn't move the ball necessarily as crisply as they did against North Carolina A&T. That was a ton of assists leading to buckets in that game, but this time it was a little bit more ISO stuff. I still felt like they found decent shots. A lot of them just didn't go in, especially early. I think they missed at least 3 or 4 layups just to open the game. It was tough sledding from the start, but once again, they leaned on their defense to create opportunities in transition and just create some easier shots for them. They scored 22 points on the fast breaks, and they scored 16 points off of 15 Binghamton turnovers. I think that's a big stat. It's just not only forcing those turnovers and making those plays defensively, but capitalizing off of them, making sure that they matter, making sure that the other team really feels them and hurts them. It hurts when they commit turnovers or when they give up, live ball changes of possession. The assist numbers weren't as high, but like I said, I felt like they got decent enough shots. There were times where I felt like when the shots weren't falling, they were forcing things a little bit. I still think they've got some improvements to make in terms of half court offense and just how they run things and how they survive shooting slumps. There were times where I felt like guys just tried to take their man, tried to go isolation a little bit, and it's not always the best move when you're struggling from the field. I think college game is different from maybe if you watch any pro ball or the NBA. Those guys can create open looks and create good shots on their own. They're just that talented. Essentially everyone on the court has the ability to do that. In college, you got to be a little more intentional, and that's harder because kids are both younger, or the players are both younger, and then obviously just the talent level is different, but you need to be focused on running good offense for an entire game. There are probably no teams in the country that can survive just running isolation plays off of out of their half court offense and think, that's really going to sustain them for an entire game. So it takes a full 40 minutes of good offense to really, play a complete game. And it's got to be a full team effort in that sense as well. So only 13 assists on 30 made field goals. I feel like that's a number that they'll try to improve upon moving forward, especially because I don't think the same kind of, how do I put this? The same kind of, opportunities in transition and off of fast breaks, off of turnovers are going to exist moving forward. Yeah, Corey's exactly right. This is a good point. Like there were a ton of missed easy shots in the first half. Like those looks were there, and for the most part, I mean, I think in the first, I want to say 2 or 3 minutes, maybe on the first possession, Ish Leggett misses 3, layups point blank right at the rim, but gets his own rebound on 3 of them as well. You have to assume that those are just going to start falling. Like Ish Leggett is too good of a player. He has too good of a track record to see that be a consistent trend for him moving forward. Speaking of Ish, he was 1 of 2 guys that had really big nights, kind of shifting gears a little bit here. He and Blake Hinson led the way for the Panthers. They Blake had 26 points on 8 of 14 shooting from the field, 4 of 9 from 3, 6 of 7 from the free throw line, just 4 rebounds, but a very good game for him. Shooting the ball kind of broke out of a slump. And then Leggett, 18 points, 6 of 14 from the field, 1 of 1 from 3, 5 of 6 from the line, 11 rebounds, 5 assists. Really good games for both of them. I'll start with Leggett. He's been really, really impressive just as far as a versatile presence, a really good two-way player, arguably Pitt's best defender, especially on the perimeter through these first 2 games. He is strong. He's got a little bit of length to him and good size. He's athletic to keep pace with guys on the perimeter. I think a lot of Pitt's defensive strategies going into both of these games has been to say, Ish, you take the best guy on the perimeter and just hound him. Just get right up into his face, be real aggressive, and then, force some turnovers off of it, make guys uncomfortable, and then we can get into that transition offense that they love so much. But he was aggressive offensively as well. Like I said, he shot a ton, especially early in the game, and he missed some shots as well, but he was rebounding them really well, and they continued to encourage him to take those shots. I think when you think about Leggett's path and where he's at in his career right now, at Rhode Island at his last stop, he was forced to take a ton of shots and produce a lot of offense for a team that didn't have guys who could really do that. But now he's on a different team. He's on a much more talented team, a team with a much more diverse array of offensive threats. But Jeff Capel doesn't want him to change because of that. He doesn't want him to change who he is. He said that in the post-game press conference, that Leggett still needs to be aggressive. He's one of this team's better players. He's one of the better offensive threats that this team has. So they can't afford for him to second guess his kind of standing in the hierarchy. If he's open, if he sees a lane, he's a good enough player that he's earned the right to shoot and to take his opportunities, going to the rim and looking for points. And at the same time, it still felt like he wasn't forcing very much. Like he was taking what was there. To a similar point about what he had to do at Rhode Island, it seemed like you just look at the numbers. He was someone who had to force himself into a lot of offense at Rhode Island. And he's been much more efficient here at Pitt. I mean, he's taking fewer shots, but he has a better supporting cast around him that's able to take some pressure off of him. He said himself that's a big difference, and part of the reason why he came to Pitt was he knew that he would be supported just by having a ton of talent around him on the floor. But he's been everything I think that Pitt has needed in a starting 2-guard. It is interesting at some point in the second half, there was an extended period where he had to kind of run the offense as the lone guard. Carrington and Lowe were both on the bench, and it was definitely not as smooth, I think. Leggett had 5 assists, like I said, but I think he had a stretch maybe really early in the second half where he was able to maybe string together 2 or 3 in a row in quick succession, but still a little iffy on whether or not they can afford to run lineups like that without one of either Lowe or Carrington on the floor, who I think are their best passers, obviously their best ball handlers, but we'll see moving forward. I mean, obviously Leggett knows how to handle the ball. He can clearly pass decently well. Just right now what we're doing is Capel's doing it, but we're watching it. We're watching them kind of feel out lineups a little bit, and we're watching them kind of figure out where everyone kind of fits together as they kind of ramp up in terms of competition and prepare for things to get real serious in about a couple weeks or so. But I think the lineups where Leggett is kind of the lone ball handler out there are interesting. It's something that they probably going to try to use a little bit more moving forward, just to test it and see if it's something that they're capable of doing moving into the future. And like I said, when the competition gets real good. So that's kind of the next step for Leggett. It's kind of the next step for this team, and the next step that you kind of want to test out and see if this team can handle moving forward. As for Hinson, I mean, he was tremendous. That was the Hinson that we know and love. He missed, I believe, his first 4 shots from the field. They were all 3-pointers, all of them pretty deep. But this is a guy that Jeff Capel has told us one of his favorite things about him is that he has convenient amnesia. That was the term he used. And Blake could not have shown that in any bigger fashion than he did tonight. Hinson missed his first 4 shots, and then I think made 8 of his next 10 for the rest of the game. Finished with 26 points, uber efficient from the field and from 3. It was a real breakout game for him after kind of a slow start in both the exhibition and I guess I wouldn't even call it slow. I mean, he only shot 1 for 6 from three in the exhibition, only scored 13 points, didn't take a ton of shots against A&T, but didn't really need to. There were a ton of other guys who were stuffing the stat sheet and scoring the ball even without him. But today was a very vintage Blake game. I think this is what everyone kind of expected from him coming into this year. I mean, only 4 rebounds, but took over and really looked like the guy. Looked like the bona fide best player on the floor, and that's what he's supposed to be. I also thought he showed off kind of a full bag of tricks in this game offensively. He obviously had the shots from deep, but I felt like he showed off a little bit of not, the handle looks a little bit better. It looks a little improved technically, but I thought his decision making and when he decided to use that handle was a lot better in this game as well. Maybe it's just a simple fact of not having Jamarius Burton, Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott, and Nike, and a bunch of other guards that can really handle the ball. But I think he feels a little bit more of a responsibility to make plays off the dribble, to use that pump fake to create things for his teammates as well. I thought that was the biggest thing I noticed was pump fakes and even a little hesitation where he made it look like he was thinking about shooting that freezes the defender a little bit, and he's able to create some wide open lanes driving to the basket. He scored off of those looks. He got fouled off of those looks. He made some good passes off of those looks. So, it was really a complete game for Blake offensively, and it was just a pretty vintage Blake game, especially considering the missing his first 4 shots and then going on to make 80% of his shots for the rest of the game. And kind of the last thing I want to touch on, if there aren't any other questions, was Bub Carrington tonight. So he was really good again tonight. He scored 18 points, 6 of 11 from the field, 4 assists. I believe that led the team. No, that was second on the team to Leggett, and just 1 turnover, 3 rebounds as well. I think he had a steal or 2 mixed in there. But he did also pick up 2 techs. And you could tell that Carrington really got up for this matchup, not just because, well, first of all, I mean, one of the biggest thing I noticed was his play against Samir Torrance, transfer from Syracuse, experienced guy, really old, I think he's 24 years old, on his 3rd school. And has been a good player in the Big East and the ACC. He's strong. He's got size, and he challenged Leggett. He and all those guards from Binghamton. A lot of those guys are experienced and big and have size in the backcourt. And they tried to throw a freshman into a frenzy and make him speed up and make life difficult on him. But Carrington didn't really bite. After a little bit of a shaky start, he was able to really lock in and really put together a good night. I thought he held up really well against Torrance and those other guys those older veterans who were able to challenge him. But he was playing with emotion, and it did kind of boil to a head at certain points. He picked up 1 tech, and I think he probably could have been called for a second one. He hit an and one. It's the first one. He's driving down the lane. He scores a bucket, and I believe Arman Harid, that's a name to remember, was guarding him as he drove and scored that bucket. He gave Farid an earful, must have said something to him that the refs thought was out of bounds, so they tee him up. He gets a talking to from Leggett and Zach Austin. Before he goes to the bench, he gets another earful from Jeff Capel. They talk him through it, tell him to calm down a little bit. But he hits an and one jumper. I believe Farid was guarding him again. And he starts to give him another earful. And immediately one of the Diaz Graham brothers, I can't exactly remember who was on the floor, runs over and tries to calm him down again. So, we heard after the game, the message was simple. They love when he plays with emotion, but they can't have it come to a head in a way that hurts the team and results in techs. Bub's a good player. They can't afford to lose him in a way like that. So, Capel wasn't really worried about it either. Like I said, Harid's a guy to remember because he knows Bub from their childhood. They're both Baltimore kids. They've played against each other, and Capel described it as a friendly rivalry between Carrington and Harid, that he kind of let maybe get the best of him at this point in this game. He wasn't particularly worried, but he was appreciative of kind of the the veteran leadership, even from a Diaz Graham, who is only in his second year, but has been around and kind of knows how harmful those things can be. Capel was real appreciative of what he did to help Carrington work through that moment. And same goes for Leggett and Austin, guys who've really been around the block before. So not something to really worry about, I think. I mean, Carrington, I think, is a pretty even keeled guy. I don't think this is going to be common for him in any other games moving forward. If he gets techs, I don't expect him to be a guy who's picking up, 2 techs or even a tech a game moving forward. But I think it's just another piece of evidence to kind of support the fact or the idea that this Pitt team has done a good job carrying over a really positive culture from last year into this year, and that even the new guys really understand what it takes to be a good teammate and support each other. And they can talk about it all they want, but that was a pretty good, tangible example of how it works out on the floor. But with that, I'm going to head out of here. Thank you all for tuning in to another Inside Pitt post-game report. Stay tuned with us tomorrow as we'll be back to break down Syracuse, the Syracuse football game, Pitt-Syracuse at Yankee Stadium. We'll have some more insight and analysis on that on this channel, so make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers. Like this video as well, and then you can find all of our reporting from this game at the Pete, and then of course that Pitt-Syracuse game at Yankee Stadium tomorrow afternoon. So again, thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, I'll see you.